Okay, so I hope you are okay for taking notes and things like that. We didn't have tables for everybody, so we thought for some of you it would be okay to be just like as you are. Good. So, Steiner schools don't prepare pupils for the world we live in. You know that?
Good.
You heard that?
Well, it's not true.
Yes, it is. And it's good that that is so. When I hear that sentence, I feel proud because it means we're doing something right. Because the world we live in is transient. It won't stay this way. And if all we do is to prepare pupils for the world as it is now, then we're failing them. So when people are trying to accuse us of not fitting in, I take that as a compliment. A colleague of mine in my last school had the task of welcoming the new class 1 to the school every year. So you have to imagine the whole school community is sitting there, class 1 in the front row like that, and their parents behind them. And he, right at the beginning of his talk, looks down at those children and he says to them, "Dear class 1, you are all going to live 100 years." And silence fell in the room. When first one thinks, how can you say that? And then the implications of what he said sort of began to trickle in. We're living 85 years, maybe 90. These children that are now 6 may well live to 100 years. And even if that's not completely true, then what a wonderful thing to say to little children. What a great future they have. But think about that for a moment. That means they will still be working in 70 years' time. And what will they be working as in 70 years' time? How much of what they do will we be able to teach them right now? Some of you might be familiar with the name Ray Kurzweil. He was director of operations at Google for many years. And when people like that speak at the Davos Forum, it's worth paying attention because people like that spend billions of dollars in development on things. So even if you don't agree with what they say, they have influence. And Ray Kurzweil said at the 2015 Davos Forum that 2/3 of the pupils in schools today will retire from professions that don't yet exist. 2/3. He may be wrong about that, but that's what Google invests money in. So what is the implication for us? It means the content we teach is fairly irrelevant. What is relevant is the skills we teach to children, and that is different. It changes the paradigm of education altogether, not just of Steiner education, of all education. So before we look at how we do that in Steiner schools, it's probably worth looking at what education is for anyway. Because in a way, there are 3 paradigms that have developed over the years. This was the first one. Education creates subjects. Think 100 years ago, the trenches of the First World War, the Battle of the Somme, 1st of July 1916. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. For 2 hours, it's been clear that the strategy on the Allied side has been a resounding mistake. They thought if they bomb the German sides for 7 days, 24 hours a day, the Germans will retreat, and then when the guns stop, the British can run across the no man's land and take the German positions. That didn't happen. The Germans just dug themselves in deeper, and when the British guns stopped, they climbed out and trained their machine guns and were ready. In the first half an hour of that battle, 8,000 British soldiers died. So they knew this wasn't going to work. On that day, 20,000 British soldiers died, and I don't know how many on the other side. The point is, somebody was standing with their foot on the ladder, knowing that none of the people who went before him had come back. And the whistle went and he still climbed up. Why? He's not stupid. He knows that's not going to have any benefit whatsoever to anyone, and yet he still goes. And the general who gave the order doesn't rescind the order, doesn't respond to news from the front that it's all going bad. No. He says, no, keep going, we'll carry on. Now, there was a time in both these people's lives when they were kind of the same, maybe at 18 months old, sitting on their mum's lap, and you couldn't have told them apart. And now one of them obeys orders uncritically, the other gives orders immorally. It's got to have been their education that was responsible for that. And of course, that didn't just happen in Britain, that happened everywhere in Europe. Yeah? And for centuries before that too. How do I need to educate children so they will uncritically do what I tell them to do? Well, putting them in a uniform is a good way of doing that. Making them feel like they're the same as everyone else. Making them copy you for years and years and years and years is a good way of doing that. Forcing them to do things that don't make sense to them is another good way of training them for a life of obeisance, for a life in which their purpose is to do as they're told. That's one way education justifies itself. This is the second way. More elegant than creating subject is to create believers. Subjects have to be threatened. They have to be forced. They have to be told that if you don't obey me, something terrible will happen to you. A cleverer way of making sure people do as you tell them is to turn them into believers, to narrow their horizon, to make them think what you want them to think. And unfortunately, children are very grateful to be told what to believe at a certain age. If you get them at the right age, then you can turn them into your creatures. And Hitler wasn't the first person who said, "Give them to me young." Yeah? Other people claimed that policy for themselves for less fascistic purposes, but more or less for the same reasons. So the Jesuits, for example, the madrasas, where children don't do anything other than move like this and recite the Quran for 5 or 6 hours a day. Yeah? Or you know where this comes from, the Soviet Union. Yeah? Slogans, 5-year plans, nothing else. No other world exists outside the belief system that I've created for you, children. I was talking to Martin last night because both of us have lectured in China. And it's quite shocking to talk to educated people, middle-class people in China, our age, fellow professionals, many of whom have studied abroad, and bring up the subject of Chinese politics or history. And you very quickly realize we've stopped talking on equal terms here, because there is a certain thing that must have happened in their education that won't allow them to go into certain places. This is not true for all Chinese people, I'm not stereotyping here, but we've both had that experience, that we stopped ourselves mid-sentence when we realized, oh, I can't go there now, because that's going to be offensive if I do. And it's not their fault, it's because of the way the education system has worked. But of course, we're in the West, and we're in a democratic society, so we don't do that anymore. We don't create subjects, we don't create believers, we create consumers. Because we can be free to shop. We can be free in this society that aims for success and then needs that success to be rewarded. So what we perceive as freedom is actually a more subtle way of control, where we we think we're in charge of this effort and success and reward cycle. We're not necessarily educated in a normal mainstream school, anyway not, to value process. We're being educated to put a lot of effort in and then get something out of it. I don't know if you did this, but whenever I had my end of term report, the first place I went to when I came home from school was my grandparents. You know why? Because there was a $5 waiting for me there. Yeah? For every one or whatever it was, for every 2, there was a $5. Maybe for every 1 there was a 10. I wasn't a very good pupil, so they didn't get poor as a result. So it was put in there right from the start, this is what we need you to do. Because at one point the society said, we need you to obey our orders. Obviously we want to win our wars, so that's what we need from you, generation. Another society says, we need you to believe in our values. This society says, we need you to buy our products. And all of them are looking at, this is what we want from you, children. And Waldorf Education, of course, prides itself on not doing that, not designing itself to fulfill the needs of society, religion, established culture, but to orientate itself on the needs of the child. And to do that, it needs to create an environment in which that is possible. So we are not Prometheus shaping children, not even very beautiful children. We're not a bonsai gardener forcing down a plant into the shape that it should finally assume so it fits under the dome that we've created for it. And quite often Waldorf schools fall into a bit of a trap. There are 3 schools in the UK that have this sentence on their website. Waldorf Education produces confident, free human beings. Produces, exactly. Yeah? Not enables human beings to develop into, produces. Yeah? So we fall into that trap in our language all the time that we think we're responsible for this, but we're not. We don't make this. We don't create this. We allow it to happen if it can happen. We are guides, not shapers. And that's a big, big difference. We don't project our expectations or our own failures onto this blank canvas that we call the child. No. Our gesture is a much more respectful one than that. And it's based on observation of the children, on imagination, and on intuition, what the right thing is. So far I've not said anything particularly provocative, I think. Certainly not in this room, but that's going to change now. Because I want to provoke you a little bit. And the first of 2 hypotheses that you may well not agree with is this one. The world is inherently good, and so is the human being. I've tried to have a look, to what extent does Waldorf Education require you as practitioners, or you as parents who send their children there, to buy into a belief system? Do you have to be Christian? No. Do you have to be white? No. Do you have to be rich? No. None of those things really matter. If you don't believe that the world is good, you're going to have a problem working in a Steiner school. And that's not as easy as it sounds to believe that. It might be for you and me. I don't know you well enough to be able to say that. But my father, for example, doesn't believe that the world is good. And he's so unhappy because of it. He thinks goodness happens by accident. And sometimes it goes that way, and sometimes it goes that way, and sometimes we have control and sometimes we don't. And I don't believe that. I think the fact that there is goodness as a possibility means it somehow needs to be there as a potential. And for me, the fact that we're all sort of trying to be good, or if we're not, we're pretending to be trying to be good, seems to say that actually there is something objective we're striving towards. And there's a rather drastic dinner party game, which I always thought that's quite a good demonstration of this. This bag contains $1 million. Okay? And it's yours when you open it. You can keep it, okay? When you open it, an old man in China dies. You don't know him. He doesn't know you. You don't know if he's a good man or a bad man. You only know he's old. Nobody will know that it's your fault. Old people die, don't they? Yeah? But his death will be a direct consequence of you opening this bag.
$1 million, as you say.
$1 million.
If it had been 2, I would have. One's not enough, sorry.
So a room of 100 people, maybe somebody will open the bag. If they do, they'll never hear the end of it. That's why it's not a very good dinner party game. Please don't do this with your guests, or, this will be the dinner party from hell. But unless you really know the people who come. But the point is, why don't I? If I don't have any consequences, if there's no punishment, if there's, he's an old man. It's not a sweet child or anything like that, yeah? And yet something stops me from doing that. That's my morality. And I do passionately believe that it's somehow ours. And I do believe that it's therefore our duty to somehow build that into what we do with the children. If it's there objectively, if it's not just some nice imagination to have a good time, then it needs to inform what we do with the pupils, our practice and the theory behind our practice. The second statement is this one. Human beings are not inherently healthy, but can become ever more so. That's harder, because even within our circles, most people will say, or many people will say, well, we're all pure when we're born. And then all the stuff happens to us, and we become somehow polluted by the world. But a baby is pure and innocent, and if we could just maintain that, then we would be healthy forever on. But I actually think that the human body is quite an imperfect vessel. And the main reason I have for that is my own one. And the limitations it has put upon me. And I don't just mean because I might have a limp or bad knees or anything like that, but also because of my being particularly beautiful, particularly ugly, left-handed, right-handed, fat, tall, short. All these kind of things have determined how I've grown up, how I've been. Not the other way around. It's influenced me, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to overcome that. Whatever I perceive as my imperfections, I'm going to have to work on. And with some people, those imperfections are more severe than with others. So what I've just mentioned, they're not disabilities, are they? But when you have a lisp, how is that? When you have Asperger's or autism, how is that? At what point do you draw the line and say, well, that's healthy and that's not healthy? And the moment you start drawing that line, you realize already, I can think of something else where that line doesn't work. And then you realize, oh, wait a minute. Nobody's actually healthy. Nobody ever will be healthy on the earth. That's not our karma. That's not what we're here for. But we can work on becoming more healthy, or less so. That we do have an influence over. And if that's the case, then if you and I are in charge of vulnerable people, i.e. children, we have a role to play there too. So you know this conversation with other parents of children that are playmates of your children, and they want to show a particular movie at the children's party or something like that, and their argument is, well, what harm can it do? Yeah? How bad can it be for them? And you attain a very interesting new perspective if you turn that question around and you say, how healthy is it? How healthy is this activity that I'm about to do with my class? Not how unhealthy is it, how many children will be damaged by it, but how many children will benefit from it? And you suddenly realize, wow, I plan completely differently when I look at the potential health-giving benefits of a particular activity. So, in modern parlance, and this is not a Steiner quote, we're coming a bit closer to what our mission might be. We're trying to work without fear. We don't want subjects. We don't want people who obey. We don't want people who do as they're told. We also don't want people who are frightened of being different or frightened of failing. So fear can't really play a role in our education. But then neither should ambition. Because if I'm really ambitious, then it's really important to me to do well. If I don't do well, I'm back where I started. Also, I don't really want to encourage the pupils I teach to look left and right and imagine I need to be better than the person next to me. Because then they're buying into this effort and reward and success kind of narrative that is being fed to them.
Do they not want to do as well as they can?
Yes.
How to improve
Yes.
and grow?
Reaching your potential, I would give you that you need a certain amount of ambition for that. But that kind of ambition I'm talking about is more the one that only looks at the end result, only looks at the finish line and compares itself to other people who are running alongside. But the three things that we do strive for in the children that we teach are resilience, sensitivity, and confidence. Because let's not beat about the bush. They might be Waldorf pupils, but they have a lot of things to put up with, and there's more things to come. We've not had it that good, have we? I mean, we might have had it better than any other generation, but we've not had it that good. Our parents got divorced, maybe. We've maybe dabbled in drugs. We've maybe gone through bad illnesses or something like that. And, we're the lucky ones. Other people have had it far worse, and the people before us and the people before them have had it really badly. So the children that are born nowadays are only on the surface lucky. Each of these generations has things that will attack their integrity, their health, their potential for fulfillment. And of course, electronic media and things like that is the big thing for this particular group. What can it destroy for them, as well as what new avenues can it open for them. So they will have to deal with that. They will need to be resilient. And I'll come back to that in a little while. But they also need to be sensitive to what is happening around them, socially awake, because I believe that nobody can be really happy if they can't feel somebody else's level of happiness and unhappiness. And again, I know people who don't, and who choose not to, and who say, I don't care how that person feels. But those tend not to be happy people. It's possible to live and not care, but I don't think it's possible to feel like that and be happy. And finally, the confidence that somebody might want in their lives is exactly what Rebecca was talking about, for aiming to reach your potential. You need to have the confidence that you're able to do that. Otherwise, you'll never try and you'll be frightened of mistakes. So those three things I'm going to come back with. But let's look a little bit away from the ideas and the theory at some practice. So what are we looking at here? Have a guess. What? Class 3 farming? You agree? Yeah, you're upper school teachers. You've forgotten what little kids look like. This is the week before class 1 starts. Okay? So these children have just literally 10 minutes before that met their class 1 teacher for the first time, i.e. me. And this is 1 week before the first day of school, and we're meeting at school for a barbecue to get to know, to go for a walk, to have little chats, to warm up the space a little bit. And so 10 minutes into the walk, we come to this barn, and I say, oh, just stand over there. I want to take a photo of you. And so I freeze this moment in time, and I know they're looking into the sun, so you can't, and so you have to excuse some of the squinting, but I see there's a real question in there. And maybe I'm just projecting that there. But that question is, are you worth it? Are you worth it? Who are you? Yes. My whole life is going to be dominated by you for years to come. Yeah? You're going to be my demigod. You're going to be more important and more powerful than my mum and dad in many ways. Yeah? If there's any conflict between something the teacher says and the parents say, the little children, you know on whose side they are. Yeah? So this is a really important moment. And what are they asking of me? Are you worth it? How do I respond? I need to build lasting relationships with these children. That's the first and foremost task. I need to connect with each and every one of these children and prove to them that I'm worth it, that I'm worth the trust they give to me. Nothing is more important than that. Yeah? That they feel, yes, this is my teacher. And once we've passed that threshold, we're in the classroom. So in groups of 4, they are creating a picture together. Just keep an eye on this boy with the fleece in the middle. You'll see him again in a minute. So do you see me teaching? Not really. I'm not really doing any teaching. But you do see the children learning. They're not learning how to write or how to do sums, but they're learning how to cooperate. They're learning how to work with each other. And is it noisy? Hell yes. Yeah? 32 children in one room, all talking. Of course it's noisy. But nobody ever said education has to be quiet. They don't need to listen to me, so they don't need to be quiet. All they need to do is communicate with each other. And look how avidly they do that. Look how freely they communicate with each other. And everybody contributes at the level that they're comfortable with. Yeah? So this chap here, he's having more of a passive role. And some children care more than others. Some children work together more harmoniously than others. Some children discuss for a long time. Some children might ask me what I think should happen there. But all these children are learning all the time. And all this time, by walking around like you see me walking around there 12 years ago, I'm observing what's going on and I'm getting to know these children. I'm learning what those children are like. Do you remember that boy with the fleece in the middle just now who was telling everybody else what was the matter? This was him on Sunday, last week, when he presented his Class 12 project. Yes, and his Class 12 project was on the subject of motivation. And he was talking about engaging your will and he knew exactly what procrastination means, and he was talking about the subsidiary exercises by Steiner and things like that. Yeah? Massively confident, stood there in gym shorts because one thing he'd wanted to try and get himself to do was to get out of bed every morning at 6 and run. And you can see from his physique he probably managed that too. So it's a real privilege, and I don't properly apologize for showing you things that have to do with the lower school, because what I want to show you, most of the things you're going to see are applicable to upper school children as well, upper school pupils as well. And the companion piece to this lecture is, of course, the upper school lecture that the B group have had last year and the C group are going to have the day after tomorrow. So there is a continuation of this, if you like, where the curriculum is concerned. So let's get to know these pupils a little better. Let's give them a chance to display themselves to me. Now, I can't go to a 9-year-old child and say, tell me what you're like. Who are you, Florentina? Because you have no idea what I'm asking her. What I can do is give her a project to do and give her as much freedom as I can possibly give her. So I can, for example, in a class 3 child, this is now class 3, say, you've got a 30 by 30 centimeter square of wood, and on that you're going to build a house. And you're not going to do that at home with your mum and dad, because I know who builds the house when you do that. You have a week to think about it and design your house, and the next Monday you're going to bring all your materials to school, and then you have 5 main lessons to build your house. And all the help you're going to get, you have to get from your friends. Okay? So that house that's going to be built there is going to be that child's house. Okay? Now, those of you who have taught younger children know that when a young child creates something, they actually draw or create or shape themselves to some extent. So when a child builds a house here, and that house has windows and that house has a door, that child says something about, this is who I am. This is how I relate to the world. And also, this is how I am as a social person. That's what the garden is for. Yeah? So this is my space, and this is how I inhabit my space. Yeah? So the bigger the garden, the bigger the distance between my core and my boundary, if you like. So this is Florentina, who's looking out at us there. And this is Linus. So take a moment and have a little chat with your neighbor. What are these two children telling us about their respective relationships to the outside world. So I'll give you a break from my voice for a moment. Just speculate a little bit between you and your neighbor. What do you see? So is it difficult to guess which of those two children is now president of the school council, for example, and also president of 3 clubs that they attend in various local bits of the community? Yeah. Have a look at this girl here. And then contrast her. Like that. You see, this is what you get if you don't see yourself as Prometheus.
As what?
As Prometheus. You know, in the Greek, the one who shapes man and woman out of clay. Many traditional Waldorf teachers that I've worked with and know think that that is their job, to mold the children. Yeah? But you miss all this if you do that. If you give them freedom, look what they do with it. They reveal themselves to you. Yeah? So the girl on the left is about to start a training as a kindergarten teacher, and the girl on the right is about to start a design study project and will probably take over her dad's bike shop at some point. Yeah? And take it to the national level, kind of. Yeah? So can you see that there? I don't know, but there we go. These children, anyway, feel good about what they've done. They felt, I do remember that day very strongly when they were all showing me what they'd done. So remember those 3 words that I mentioned earlier: resilience, sensitivity, confidence. I'm halfway through almost. I know those children, and now I'm going to take every opportunity I can for them to do that more and more, to engage in things that will build resilience, sensitivity, confidence. Drama is a brilliant thing for doing that, because if you do a play with children and a child has lines to say on the stage, it doesn't matter what just happened at break time. It doesn't matter if their cat has died. It doesn't matter if they're upset about their favorite football club losing. This is what matters now. So they develop an ability to create boundaries, to push things away that would get in the way right now. That's resilience. They also realize where somebody else needs to be at a certain time. That's sensitivity too. They become awake to the space around them. That should be on the stage there, and this person should be there right now, and this is his place, and this is where I am right now. So they become much more awake to what's going on there. And of course, the confidence goes without saying. So even the smallest child in the class, when they get a big part, they can go, ha-ha. And please do take the opportunity of involving as many pupils as you possibly can in these things. Do you know where you just saw those 4 children? You see that throne? Yeah? So the king walks off, and then the throne walks off. Okay? And for the forest scene, you have trees. Can you see the tree trunk that boy is sitting on? So involve them wherever and whenever you can. Yeah? Because this working together makes a huge difference to them. And this is possibly a little controversial depending on what you're used to, but I think plays don't need parents. In fact, plays hardly need grown-ups at all. Obviously, you need to tell them their lines, and you maybe need to write the play and all that kind of thing. But from a certain point, you can let them get on with it. And it might not be the most beautiful play that was ever put on the school stage, but if the pupils own it, they've created something much more real and much more lasting. So as a golden rule, I would say, from about the age of the middle school, don't let an adult do what a child could otherwise do, because this ownership is really, really massively important. So what we did with this particular group was we created a tour with this play. We went, I think, to 12 Camp Hills, local kindergartens, libraries, and so on, and performed this fairy tale play that we'd learned. So everything had to be wrap-upable and pack-upable, and every child had a task. Okay? So it would literally be, we had a performance at 11 o'clock in the primary school in town, and I would teach normal main lesson till 9:30 or something like that. We'd have break time, and at 10 o'clock we'd meet in the classroom, and I'd say, okay, everybody knows what they have to do, 10 minutes in the car park. Okay, then the kids go there with their stuff. That's the one time we need the parents to drive us to the school where we're about to perform. We unpack. I say, okay, we've got quarter of an hour, get everything ready. They go on the stage, they're ready. They do the music, they do the scenery, they do everything. Perform the play, applause, get some apple juice, pack everything in the cars, parents drive us back to school, and then it's English. Okay? And this is, it runs, it works. We don't make a big deal out of it because it's not about effort and reward all the time. It's the process. Yeah? And if you do a play 12 times, then it really works like that. And then they really go, oh, he's not here today. Oh, Mr. Zah, didn't you notice? And I went, oh, no. What do we do? Oh, don't worry, I'll do it. And off it goes. Yeah? They solve their own problems. We come to this middle point in their development. And in a way, we could stop them. Same class, same number of pupils. What do you think? I'm still not teaching. Yep. That's what a happy class 5 sounds like. I've not told them to be quiet. This is the last week of the geometry main lesson. So they're allowed to do their own designs in their books. So that's why they all work on different things. They have little books that they try things out in and then transfer their designs into their big books. And I love this video. It's just utter perfection. Yeah? Every child, look at that. Every child produces something beautiful. And they were by no means all talented artists. Yeah? That line that this girl is drawing there, yeah, that straight line is just so beautiful. And I can go, yes. Finished, done it, happy kids. Yeah? But Steiner uses a beautiful German word for which there isn't really an English equivalent. It's called erdenreif, mature for the earth. And that only applies in the developmental psychology that he brings us to at the age of 14. They're not mature for the earth yet. They are at a certain pinnacle in their development, in the middle of childhood, but something else has to happen now. And that what has to happen now is they stop being children. They're not right away teenagers, because this process takes 2 or 3 years, where you begin to be less and less and less of a child. And that hurts. Do you know when 8-year-olds come and have a play date? You know, do you want to come to mine and play today? They don't decide what they're going to play, do they? They just come. And then they disappear upstairs or go in the garden. And then they go from one activity to the other. 12-year-olds can't play like that anymore. They need a plan. They need to go bowling or basketball or swimming or whatever it is. They don't just come and be. This ability of a child to just be gets lost at this stage. Unfortunately, at this time also, they discover that adults can't be relied upon. Adults promise things that they don't keep. They pretend that everything is all right when it isn't. They tell lies. And they don't have good reasons for those lies. And this happens, you discover this during your 12th year. Maybe you've discovered it before, but it really hits you during your 12th year. And you think, and now what? Luckily, at that same time, you're also at a certain high level of competence, not confidence, competence. You're actually really good at stuff. I have a theory that nobody's been able to disprove yet, that you can teach a 12-year-old everything, every task there is. Yeah? You can teach a 12-year-old to run a family, to cook a meal, to drive a car, to fire a gun. Yeah? A 12-year-old is in terms of competence already there at grown-up level. Of course, not from a soul maturity level. So how about if one used that? Just this time when they begin to doubt everything. Oh, everything's falling apart and I'm not as happy and my best friend from 4 years is no longer my friend. I don't really like the world. I don't really like myself. How about we give the children at that precise moment the feeling, no, the conviction that they're really, really good at something. And this is a little project I would like to talk to you about. And that can happen in the upper school too. It's not really a lower school thing as such. What happened was this. In the curriculum for class 6, it says the children need to learn how to do business maths. So profit and loss, percentages, all these kind of things. At that time, the cook in the school canteen said, I can no longer serve sandwiches at break time because my assistant is ill and I don't manage it. I need to cook the lunch. So there is a vacancy for creating for creating break snacks at the school. So I proposed to the class, hey, how about that? Shall we create a firm? Shall we found a company? Now, I've done that before with my first 2 classes 6, but those were pretend companies. Shall we pretend to run the school shop for a week? Shall we pretend to run a garage, a car business, and then learn all the math stuff? This one was for real. So I said, look, if we do this and if we pull this off, they're going to be buying their break snacks from us. That means they don't bring them in the morning. That means we need to deliver. Are you up for this? And they said, well, yes. And I said, but we're going to make this real, which means real money, because this is going to cost something. We're going to do this well. We're going to create a company, enter it as a company. We're going to have a brand and a logo and a name. We're going to do market research so that we know what sells well. We're going to have teams for this and teams for that. We're going to have managers and all this kind of thing. Are you up for this? And they went, yay! So I said, okay, how much money do you want to put in? And they said, what? I said, well, a proper company. We need a few €100 to start with. We need to buy a kitchen. We need to buy a fridge. We need to buy, all these materials that we need to create proper hygienic sandwiches. So each of us put in €20, real money. Not from the parents, from the pupils and from me. So €660 went in. First thing was, that boy with the wide open window earlier on? Yeah. He went to his local carpentry shop and he commissioned, 12-year-old boy, a sales stall. Yeah. One that was big enough that we could store all our materials and that had wheels underneath and could be wheeled to and fro with a logo on the front and everything. Okay. Somebody else had a committee, ran a committee to design T-shirts that would carry the logo. The logo had been decided by the pupils and all this kind of thing. And I was not the boss. I was not in charge of this. I was just one of 33. So whenever I had a good idea, I had to ask the class, what do you think? And they weren't easy to manipulate anymore. That was quite interesting. So this is how it worked. Every morning, the buying team would stop at the local organic shop that also had a bakery, would get about 40 rolls, and would buy mozzarella, salad, eggs, cheese, salami, all this kind of thing that we needed there. Bring it there, go to the business manager people who entered everything into the big ledger, put it in the fridge, get it ready. That day's preparation team would wash their hands, change their clothes, get themselves ready. And this is 6 feet away from the blackboard, by the way. Okay? So they're starting already 15 minutes before school starts. Then they stop because it's time for the morning verse. Okay? We sing a song. We have our verse. I start teaching. They go back into the kitchen. Okay? And they do amazing things in there. We have, I think, 3 teams. So every 3 days, it's their turn. Who take it in turn? No, it was 4 teams. 4 teams who take it in turns. We have certain fixed orders. So we also do for the teachers conference and all this kind of thing on Thursdays. It's extra order. We have 6 different models. We call these things Valdis. They're called Valdi to go. That's the name of our shop. And we sell these things, and we don't make a huge profit. Because I think that we sell them for €1.50 and they cost about €1.20 to produce because everything's organic and everything's from the local shop. But because they're really popular, we end up making about €40 profit every week. And of course, we don't just do that for 3 weeks. We come to the end of the maths main lesson, and then it's history. And I asked the class, okay, you do realize we're carrying on with this? And they said, yeah. It's really interesting. We're only making 40 euros profit. That's like 120 each. You know, they get that, I mean, these are German Waldorf kids. They get that in pocket money easily, yeah? But it doesn't matter, does it? Because they really care. They're producing something that's really good there. So this continues for half a year. After 3 months, we've got our investment back, and from then on, of course, the profit really becomes profit. And then, of course, comes the question, where's that money actually going? Are we going to do a class trip? Are we going to have a party or something like that? And you know what I said? Each of you decides themselves what you're going to do with your money. We're not going to have a vote, you know, or anything like that. Each of you gets their money in their hand. What, you mean I can just keep that? Yeah. And what if I buy sweets with it for 15 euros? And I say, well, you buy sweets with it for 15 euros. You've worked for this. It's your responsibility. And the next day, 3 girls come and go, Hazar, can we donate that money to Greenpeace? Isn't that sweet that they actually think they have to ask me that? Yeah, they're so uncomfortable with the idea that they would keep this. Yeah, but it's so much more powerful then, isn't it? If I haven't told them it needs to be donated, if it comes from them, that's when it's really there. And of course, you can do this sort of thing at any age. And you know, I'm going to move on to another theme in a minute, but the moment I knew this had really been successful was when we had a holiday and I forgot about it. Went skiing, did my thing, came back on Saturday before the start of term, and I realized, oh no, it's Saturday today, school starts on Monday, loads of kids are going to queue up at that stall and we haven't bought any ingredients. What do we do? So I ring up Sophia, who is in charge of the buying team, and I said, Sophia, we've got an emergency. It's Saturday afternoon now. There won't be any open shops. We've somehow got to get stuff to sell on Monday. Can you ring round? And she said, don't worry. We met last Thursday. We've been to the shop already. We've talked to the caretaker. He let us into the school. The fridge is stocked. Great. You know, it's another one of those moments where you think I can stop now. That was class 6. Yeah. So let's move on, because of course we don't stop there either. Do you all recognize this sculpture? How many of you have seen it in real? Okay, not all of you. Well, if it was standing out there in the playground, in the courtyard, it would now look through the window. That's how tall it is, yeah, as a statue. I'll tell you in a minute what it displays, what it shows, but because you've been sitting patiently for 50 minutes or so, just get on your feet for a moment and try and stand like he does.
You need some big hands.
So maybe start with the legs. Look at what his hip is doing. You realize when you look that his shoulders are at different heights. Can you see that? Yeah? So that hand that isn't lifted is really carrying a heavy weight. What you don't see on this picture is that that's got a stone in. Yeah? And then at the moment, most of you are looking at that. Now try what happens if you now stop focusing on that and turn your head like he turns his head. How does it make you feel? Find some adjectives to describe how it makes you feel.
Bit arrogant.
Good.
Separate.
Just throw them in.
Separate.
Mm-hmm. What does it do with you?
Strong.
Superiority.
Anything else?
Is there a target he's watching?
Is there a?
Is there a target that he's watching somehow?
There is a target, yes. I'll tell you the story in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, have a seat again. Try and remember that feeling a little bit. So what we're looking at is a sculpture that is about 500 odd years old. Was created by Michelangelo, and it's the biblical figure of David. In the battle, or just before the battle with Goliath. And what was new about this sculpture was that Michelangelo showed David at a moment where no other sculptor had shown him before. Up to that point, every portrayal of David was after he had slain Goliath. So you see David with his head, with his foot on Goliath's head, with his sword there, having cut off the head. This is the first time the beginning of the story is portrayed. And the story goes like this, that the Hebrews were facing the army of the Philistines. And David was just a shepherd boy. He was a bit of a favorite of the king, but he wasn't a trained soldier or anything like that. In fact, he used to have to defend his sheep, which is why he had a slingshot made out of leather that he used to throw stones at lions and all that kind of thing. And he was strong. The Bible describes that he strangled a lion with his bare hands. Yeah? So he wasn't a puny little boy. But he's part of this battle there. And then the king of the Philistines says, to avoid the war, we challenge you to a duel, our best man against your best man. And King Saul says, I accept. And then the Philistine best man comes forward, and he's huge. He's called Goliath. He's an absolute giant of a guy, and he goes, yeah? And King Saul looks up and down the line of the Hebrews, and he goes, yeah, go on then. Who of you is going to take that guy? And they all go. And David goes, I'll have him. Like that. Yeah? I'll have him. And all he has is a stone in his hand. And you know the story, Goliath makes fun of him, and David then throws the stone hits Goliath here. Goliath is temporarily stunned and falls over, and David then takes Goliath's sword and cuts off his head, and they avoid the war. So it's a good ending to the story. But the interesting bit is this moment where David steps out. Because I would say to you that this is a portrayal of the adolescent that has left the childhood behind, the safety of the childhood. He steps out there and he says, can you see me? Everybody? Can you see me? I'm up for this. I'm ready for this. Do you know 13-year-olds that do that? That sort of go, yeah, I can. Yeah. Columbus was like that too. Yeah, there's land on the other side. Martin Luther was like that too. That's why they come into the Class 7 curriculum. Yeah, I'll have a go. I'm not frightened. But you see, Michelangelo is not just any old artist. Same sculpture. If I'd shown you only that to start with and asked you, what do you see in there? Would you have said arrogance?
Fear in his eyes, right?
I think confidence.
Certainly his physical attitude, but his facial expression is not that confident, is it? There's a certain element of doubt. Actually, am I up for this? I'm not looking at that guy is pretty big. And then you see if you can manage to climb a scaffold right in front of the David, which nobody can, of course, because it's up there, and you're looking at it from below, and you're looking straight into his face, you see this. And this, you see, is the dichotomy of the adolescent. Yeah? On the one hand, he does that to us, and he goes, yeah, see me? Yeah, that's me. I can take you. But actually, that is just as alive in this young person. Do you realize something? I still haven't talked about teaching. It's all about knowing the children. And you have this young person in front of you who gives you a bloody hard time. Yeah? Or quite often in Class 7 it's a girl. Yeah? Who will not let go. Yeah? Not somebody who's rude or who swears at you or uses bad language, but somebody who's just always at it. Yeah? And they come at you in this kind of David way, but it helps enormously if you know that there's a part of her where you just don't have the right perspective to see that right now. That feels like this. What on earth am I doing? I'm challenging my class teacher, or my French teacher, or my handwork teacher, doesn't matter. Yeah? I must be mad for doing this. And it's massively helpful to avoid, to get over these moments of conflict if in the evening when you think about, what was that about again? If you picture that pupil and you don't see that pupil as they are now, but you see them when they're 40, say, or 50, and you try and get a picture, what will your life be like? Will you be married? Will you have children? Will you be a good dad or mum? Will you have friends? When you don't turn up for work, will your colleagues be happy or sad about that? What are your hobbies going to be? What films will you like? What music will you listen to? And you really try and get this sort of future picture, and then you suddenly realize, oh wow, what I'm seeing right now is like taking a plant out of the ground, putting it there and saying that's a plant. All it is a very momentary glimpse. The real plant you can only see when it's growing over time. And the real child you can also only see when it's growing over time. And the older the children get, the more memorable the experience will be. The experience will be that you give to them. And the experiences you design for those young people should be ones that leave traces, imprints on them. Not scars, but footsteps, if you like. Very soft ones. This is has any of you been to Rosyllie Beach in Wales? It's one of the most beautiful spots as far as I'm concerned. So it's in South Wales. And it's at the end of a little peninsula, and the beach is about 5 or 6 kilometers from one end to the other. And at low tide, it's about 800 meters wide. And there's a lot of tide. Yeah? So when the sea is full, it comes right up to there. And then the sea goes out a long, long way. And when my class were at this age, so class 7, we went to a campsite which is just behind those dunes. And one night at midnight, I woke them up. And I said, we're going for a walk now, so make sure we'll be out for 2 or 3 hours, so make sure you're well dressed. And then with a colleague together, the pupils and I went for about 45 minutes until we were about here. And then I said, okay, now we're going to do something challenging. I'm inviting you to a challenge. You don't have to do it, but I recommend that you do it because you probably won't forget about this. Each of you is going to walk back by themselves in a 3-minute interval. Back, you can't really go wrong. To the left is the sea, to the right is a cliff, in front of you is nothing but empty beach, so you're safe. And we're having 3-minute distances between you, so the next person won't be catching up with you and you won't be catching up with the next person. Do that if you dare. You're going to be walking for about half an hour by yourself in this time, and then see how that feels. So I went first, and then in 3-minute intervals, my colleague sent the others, one by one. And that night we had a fairly full moon, but a lot of cloud, and a very low cloud. So there was mist all around us. So you could see probably from about here to that stand there. Yeah, you had a circle of about maybe 5 meters around you that was visible, but it was all grey. There was no sensory impression at all. There was just this grey, undefined thing underneath, never changed. Of course, you had footsteps you could follow, so you knew which way to go, but apart from that, just sand. To the left, soft sound of water, that was all. After about 5 minutes, you're in a completely different space, and probably one that you will never again inhabit for the rest of your life. And so every one of those pupils did this, did this challenge, although they wouldn't have been forced to, of course. And then when they came out of those, for the others who were waiting with me, they didn't cheer or clap or anything like that. They hugged each other very quietly, until all the pupils were back. And it took a long time, but they waited for every single one of them. And then we went to bed, 4 o'clock in the morning. And the next day at 11 or so, we sat around the fire and I said, okay, now tell me, how was that? And this wonderful, wonderful girl said, I have never felt so me-ish before. I have never felt so me-ish before. Me-ish. She created a word that doesn't exist. Yeah? In German, you would translate that as ichig, but that also doesn't exist. Yeah? It's like you use the word I and you turn it into an adjective. That's the only word she could find to describe what she felt. Yeah? She felt herself. And you don't forget that sort of thing. And so as a teacher, you're now really giving them every opportunity you can to show to the others in a safe space who they are and what they're like. So instead of putting up all their pictures on a weekly basis, everything the class has done and put it there, we decided that we would have a gallery and every child, every pupil would have a picture frame. And you know these picture frames where you can just put lots of pictures in from the back and then close them again? So each pupil was in charge of their particular picture frame. So this was on the first day, and we'd just done self-portraits so that they show all the same. But from that day onwards, each pupil could decide which picture they wanted to show. So some of them kept that self-portrait for weeks. Others changed every day, every time. Others put the new pictures at the back and put some others that they really liked back out again. They could show to the class, hey, this is what I like about what I do. This is me, in other words. But again, in a safe place, but much more conscious this time than with the house, of course. So we come to the end of this long run, this class 8 sort of run. And now your authority as a teacher, this question they had of you, are you really worth it, is answered in a much more conscious way. But they're no longer quite as confident. Now, so this slight wobbliness that they had, that was looking out of the picture in class 1, for a time, that became really smooth. Yeah, so this class 5 time that you saw with the geometry, that was really the peak of, aren't they wonderful? Aren't class 5 wonderful? Handwork teacher loves them, gym teacher loves them, music teacher loves them. So nice. They queue up for voluntary eurythmy at lunchtime because they like eurythmy so much. But class 8, they have concerns. That's what they look like now. And you see almost like they've come back to the same place but transformed. And they have these questions now. Well, okay, we know a lot about the world, you know. So you can let go of us now, class teacher. We're sort of ready and we want to meet the world through our own eyes now, no longer through yours. And if you're a wise class teacher, of course, you will have realized that in class 1, and your whole 8 years were a process of letting them go, so that they're really also ready for this. And then they come into the world and they see something like this. 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, that was a big news story in the UK. And I think in Germany as well. I'm not sure about Scandinavian countries. This was an actual headline. UN aid workers raped 60,000 people, as its claimed organization employs 3,300 pedophiles. It's the Sun newspaper, biggest newspaper in the UK. And below that it says, a whistleblower has claimed UN staff could have carried out 60,000 rapes in the last decade as aid workers indulge in sex abuse unchecked around the world. The claim is in a bombshell dossier that former senior United Nations official Andrew MacLeod handed over to the Department for International Development Secretary Priti Patel last year. So that was 2 years ago. Do you remember that story? Yeah? So UN employees had sexually assaulted people who they were supposed to be protecting. Yeah, it's a huge thing. As a result of this, the money that was donated to the UN in the UK alone fell from £72 million the year before to 38 million now. Because who wants to finance a culture of sexual abuse and exploitation and rape? Yeah? So this thing did enormous damage to the reputation of the United Nations. And quite rightly so. I mean, who was in favor of that? Look at that poor girl. Yeah? And then the New York Times went after that story and thought, okay, what really happened here? What was the real story behind that? And this is what they found out. The United Nations themselves in 2017 published a report. And that report said, quite honestly, that 311 reported cases of sexual exploitation had come to light that were involving UN soldiers, peacekeeping forces. So 311 cases of sexual exploitation, not rape, sexual exploitation. And the UN Secretary General was very honest about this. And he said, we're really worried that this sort of thing happens under our banner. And we need to look at that because it's probably even worse on the civilian side. And he said, I repeat what he said, it's probably even worse on the civilian side. So this Andrew MacLeod, who used to work for the United Nations, picked that up and said, okay, if there's a civilian side and it's probably even worse, then it's at least twice as bad. So that means not 300 cases, but at least 600 cases. Because obviously the civilian people are at it as well. That's what he just implied. And because only 1 in 10 sexual exploitation things is actually reported to the police, the real figure is likely to be not 600, but 6,000. Because UK statistics show that only 1 in 10 sexual crimes gets reported. So there must have been 6,000, not 300. And that over a decade, 10 years, would be 60,000. So 60,000 rapes have come out of 311 sexual exploitation cases. So what's the narrative here? What's happening? What's the motivation behind what happened there? This is just, I could have picked up any of a whole number of cases like this. The narrative, and I don't know who feeds it, is to undermine trust in an organization which is actually purely there to do good in the world. The United Nations makes no money, is not there to do anything other than, remember what I said earlier on? The human being is good, the world is good. That's what the UN is there for, nothing else. And now something like this feeds the narrative that says, no, they don't do that. Don't trust them. But what happens if we lose our trust in the goodness of the world? Does that make the world a better place? If we all become cynics? Is that going to help anyone, make anyone better? And it's this sort of thing, you see, that young people in our charge, in our care, need to become resilient towards. That's what they're faced with. Fake news. But not just any old fake news. They're faced with a world which appears to suggest to them that it's not worth striving for the good, that everything is tainted, that nothing is pure. And they need to be able to put that out there and understand what's really going on. Do you remember when you came in on the first day, I put a quote by Michaela Glöckler on the blackboard that said, if we don't think for ourselves, then other people will instrumentalize us with their thinking. This is what happened here, in this thing. And it's resilience against the assault of cynicism, sensitivity to the needs of others, and confidence in my ability to make a difference that I'm trying to realize when I go through my education. And that's what the Waldorf School is trying to help to achieve. So far for this evening. Thanks for your patience. So I don't know if you want to move into a question space at this stage or not. I completely understand that that's not necessarily the thing because you need to let things settle. But if any of you feel moved to say or yeah.
Actually, one question you talked about, like the importance of really knowing your students. And one thing I've been thinking about as a subject teacher, when you perhaps teach all the classes, you have 300 students. You meet them for 5 minutes every week. how can you like really get to know them and form connection with them.
Can I answer your question with a picture? Do you remember the big tsunami in Japan in 2011? And this is a story I read in the paper shortly after that happened. And as a result of the big tsunami, on one particular beach, 10,000 fish were thrown onto the beach. And they were lying there, starting to smell. Some of them were still alive, This was a horrible, horrible thing. And there was this man who picked up one fish after another and threw them back into the sea. And then somebody went to him and said, "What are you doing? Look at those mountains. It makes absolutely no difference what you're doing here." And he says, to every fish that lands in the sea, it makes a very big difference. Do you know what I'm trying to say to you? Yeah? You don't have to have this relationship with all 300 of them. But if you have 2 or 20, it makes a huge difference to those children that you have that relationship with them. Yeah. Should we let it sink? I'm happy to engage in conversation in any of the sessions or in between if you feel like. And as I say, if you're in Group C, there is a specifically upper school thread that I would like to pick up then. I think it's the day after tomorrow in the afternoon. Okay. So have a good night.
Yeah.